Yeah, we a very happy evening to folks joining from India as well as overseas, and a very happy evening to Mr. Musthafa Soukath, our expert speaker for the evening. As you all know, Spin Chennai is more than 27 years old, one of the most exclusive and dynamic spins amongst the 100-odd spins in the world. Not only because of the reach and programs and the impact, but also for consistency and relevancy with the future focus. It has been the pioneer in promoting various high maturity, quality and management practices, processes, frameworks, models, including CMMI 2.0, Lean Six Sigma, TOC, BS 7799, GDPR. I think you name it, we have had various activities around it. So we are one of the early ones to identify digital transformation maturity as an important component for Indian businesses to remain competitive as well as productive and capture the global opportunities. So I think if you take one metric like supply chain cost for India, it is at 14% of the GDP, whereas most other countries, well-developed countries, it is at 8%. What this shows is there is a huge scope for digital transformation in just the supply chain area. I think you can take it, this can apply to any part of the business, any specific area. So we were, if you take Agile, we were one of the early ones. Since 2011, we have been promoting Agile. And we recently, in the last 2-3 years, we had invited the Scrum creator, Dr. Jeff Sutherland, 2 times. One time as a speaker at our distinguished lecture series, and another time as a chief guest at Watson Awards. So Spin Chennai also, we have seen this generative AI being a huge trend. And starting this year, early, we started brainstorming on the processes, policies, frameworks around these. If you see our last few sessions, we've been having only sessions about AI, ML, and generative AI. Spin Chennai also is focusing on ESG framework as a big theme, because the environment, social, and governance, and is sustainability in all our thinking and activities is a very, very important component, because that is the direction almost every organization is moving towards. So we collaborated with a Gulf-based CEC group, and we brought some sessions. So we during 2022 we included this as a focus area for submitting case studies under Watson Free, and this year also Watson Free 2023 is going to have this ESG as well. And of course, generative AI is it's also an important theme under digital transformation. So Spin Chennai is also focuses on supporting Atmanirbhar through startup innovation and contribution to IP filing. So we are working on this through various partner ecosystems. And our steering committee members continue to play an active role in shaping global standards. They do various assessments. The CMMI version 2.0, we have had some contributions. Agile, GDPR, almost in every standard, we have had some improvements that have been happening. And recently, Spin Chennai was a key supporting organization to FICCI DT7, July 7th, that got concluded, that had the theme, can consumer electronics and telecom be the next $1 trillion export sectors for India? So at Spin, our vision is to build an open and world-class knowledge ecosystem, which is very compelling, highly relevant and value-adding, distinctively futuristic, and passionately co-creative. I think we stress on the word co-creative. We want to co-create with every member, every organization, every partner. And some of the world-renowned gurus who have given guidance and who have visited Chennai Spin for various sessions, physical or virtual, include Dr. Watts Humphrey, who has spent a long time with us, Louis Trigger, one of the key proponents of TCO, Dr. Bill Curtis, Mark Johnson, InnoSight, Dr. Jeff Sutherland, Michael Krigsman of the CXO Talk, Professor Manu Vora, people from Google, YouTube, Twitter, and various other Indian gurus. So our ecosystem has been continuously growing. We are more than a 4,000 strong community. And there are 7 ways to engage with the Spin Chennai ecosystem. One as a member, corporate or individual member, or as an event delegate, like some of the delegates joined today. Attendee on one of our training programs. We also conduct various training programs. Or you can participate as a contestant in a Watts Humphrey Awards or some other challenge. Or you may be a faculty or a trainer in one of those training sessions. Or you could be a strategic partner like IJATC, a conference, international journal, who publishes many of the papers and from interested parties, or as a sponsor of our events, kind of like an academic partner or whatever. You can participate as a sponsor for one of the events. So coming to today's topic, Agile software development with the generative AI, do's and don'ts. The generative AI has gotten a lot of attention for very in-depth chats, either creating a new art or answering questions. See, generative AI, now the developers are already using tools like Microsoft GitHub, that can double their productivity and improve their satisfaction. While such tools are there, what can generative AI have on, what impact it will have on Agile software development? So if you double a developer's productivity, that means, do you build twice as much software, or do you cut the team size into half? As the technology evolves, what does this mean for the future? Right? Either you will have teams that depend on Gen AI, or small teams that have very few hyper-productive senior developers. How is the situation going to be in the future? Right? In either of these scenarios, we are going to see a significant change in Agile software development. Right? Over 20 years ago, or 15 years ago, when the Agile manifesto was written, it was written to solve specific problems, right? Because if you take the 90s, software development was like manufacturing. Teams would develop software just like you build a bridge, or a lot of upfront planning, and then the teams follow detailed plans. But Scrum and Extreme programming, treated software like a science. Now you have highly collaborative teams that could pivot when they need really to make changes. So I think the customer, it all revolves around customers' expectations. And, customer, in fact, the customer representative is the person who drives the changes. But post-COVID, still, things are changing more, where we have now remote distributed teams. This make it much more difficult to work in close collaboration with the face-to-face communication lacking. So in this kind of scenario, generative AI is coming in. So how does it help in collaborative and agile development? Where can it be applied in a corporate scenario? What are the do's and don'ts? I think, we are all eager to listen to Musthafa Soukath. Musthafa is, one of the best-selling author, strategic leader, and agile expert with over 21 years of experience. He led one of the largest enterprise agile transformations in corporate history, which became a Harvard teaching case. He is the author of the #1 best-selling book, Scrum Narrative and PSM Exam Guide, and The Road to Agile Coaching. And he has consulted with over 25 global organizations on Agile and DevOps. He is also the architect behind the prestigious TCS Agile Ninja Coach program and a co-inventor of the TCS Location Independent Agile. He is currently the Global Head of Agile and Agility AI initiatives in TCS. And without spending any more time, I would like to invite Mr. Musthafa Soukath to share his thoughts. But before that, please unmute and give him a big applause. Over to you, Musthafa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rajaram. It's always a pleasure to come back to Spin, both as a contestant, listener, also as a speaker. I think a lot has been said about what Spin is doing. And the biggest beneficial part for us is the collaboration, right? Bringing the industry, academics, different stakeholders of the game together for sessions like this. I really wish that this has to really go to a lot bigger scale than how we are doing it today. Very, very impressive list of contributions this organization is making. Pretty glad to be here. Now, we will get into this Agile software development with the context of generative AI. In my view, this is still early days to concretely predict a trend from initial leads. We definitely see a lot of hack stuff that's going out there. People develop some tools, they put it out there for others to go and consume. But is it really at an enterprise scale major organizations can use? That's where the question is. So we are going to look at the whole space, Agile software development delivery, with the context of what's going on. What are some of the risks that we should avoid? What are some of the opportunities that we should build on? So that's the intent of this session. I'll just go ahead with the topic. Three things primarily. Understanding Gen AI, most of us know it, but it doesn't hurt to get a refreshing view of Gen AI from my perspective. Second is, what's the predominant use case out there, right? Though we talk about Agile software delivery, where are the initial use cases being tried? So let's have a larger understanding on that and then jump with a focus into generative AI for Agile software development. And as I said, most of the talk will be on the third segment, Agile software development, with emphasis on do's and don'ts. So let's start the first segment, generative AI. Why it is different and disruptive? Very well known, but still I thought that we will take a stab at what exactly that X factor that got excitement for all of us. So here is an example where I put in a query into Google. It is actually a technical query from a developer perspective. How do I delete all the Python files in a folder and subfolders? And what Google does, as usual, it throws a number of very useful things. You cannot ignore Google's contribution to the world because we are generative AI now. But then when you compare with generative AI, few problems are there. One is the query, what I asked itself is misunderstood. Basically, I asked the direction to delete files within a directory. But the answer it gave is delete the directory itself, right? Huge misunderstanding. Google's SEO, search engine optimization, is one of the best actually in the world. But still that machine couldn't correlate what I was asking versus the solution provider. Not stopping there, it has dumped number of links for me to go through and then figure out the solution for myself. So that's a machine for us. Now, if you go there, try the same thing in a chat GPT or a bot. I'm showing the screen where it's the same query, same input. Fashionably, it's called as a prompt today. It's the same prompt. And you can see no confusing statements, no misunderstanding, just one thing that I wanted to know. it gives it on dot, right? Hey, here is the command that you have to execute, and look at it, right? Very clearly, this is about deleting the Python files. Now, that connection between what I asked versus what it gave is the one that differentiates from anything else, including Google. But the story doesn't stop there. Look at what it does subsequently. It's the same flow of conversation, right? I didn't ask about risk management, production, anything at all. It proactively suggests, just like a mentor, just like somebody who is mentoring you for a job. Hey, you probably ask a wrong question. Why do you want to delete Python file? That doesn't make sense. Perhaps you want to check whether you really want to do that, right? They sound to be important stuff to be deleted. So instead of deleting it, why don't you print? Why don't you see the list and then decide for yourself? It gives a command for that. Doesn't stop there yet. And what I am asking subsequently is just like a conversation with a mentor, right? Hey, that's a great idea. Why don't you give me a test scenario where I will delete, ensure it works in the test environment, then I will execute in real time for production like data, right? Then it goes on and the conversation continues. You get the idea now, right? It's pretty human-like. However, what you saw is only the screen out there. There is a complex architecture behind. I'm not going to spend time on this one. So this is actually the architecture that is summarized to the last or the least level of complexity. We cannot compress it any further. It's really huge out there. You might have heard that OpenAI, when it built ChatGPT, the first GPT-2 version, it took 1 year to completely train in a ultra computing environment. So you can imagine the kind of architecture they might have built. Now, I'm not going to spend time on this one. All you have to understand is that, how does this magic happen, right? You saw the interaction with it. How does it talk like a human for the most part? The simple answer is there is a lot of research on how human brain works. Till date, human brain is the most astonishing computing infrastructure in the world compared to any other artificial thing out there. And there was an attempt for several years to mimic how brain works. Typically, we look at bit-sized information in the computer world, 0 and 1. But the way that brain works is very different with underlying neurons. Every human has billions of neurons. GPT-3, the one that we're using on ChatGPT, has equal number of neurons. It's based upon neural network. So without complicating it much, all I want to say is that it has the architecture behind that mimics how the brain works. You pass the information, how serendipity is used by brain to come up with information, sometimes how memory is used to do that, how we think on the spot. Many of them are coded to a reasonable level. Still doesn't beat in the brain, but it has come closer. So please understand, there is an extensive, mind-blowing innovation behind that's driving this kind of conversation. That's a good news. What's the bad news? It can still provide inaccurate output. It can imitate wrong behavior too. Let's look at an example. This is a conversation with the Bard, Google's ChatGPT equivalent. So where I was asking this question, can you find me this information about a company? It's called price versus earning. P/B ratio, very familiar term for financial people out there. Tells about what's the value of the company in simple terms, right? So I'm asking about a company. It gives me a number, 8.12. And knowing that company, I know right off the bat, this is incorrect, right? That is a startup company. Very promising in Indian context. Minimum should be 40-50 times. It's valued 40-50 times earning just by back of the envelope calculation. But gives a very abnormal number. So that is one. It has given me a number. It's a wrong thing. What happened subsequently is the most interesting part. Then I asked, hey, you wouldn't have taken this arbitrarily from somewhere. End of the day, you are a machine. You would have taken it from a source. Why not you tell me about that source? Now look at the response, right? I got this information from some source, a financial news website, and it has removed it. And the time lag between my first query, hey, what's a P/E versus this one, probably is few seconds only, maybe 10 seconds max. So it's literally close impossible that it went real time, looked at a financial website, got the data. By the time you ask the next question, removed, not at all trustable, right? And my learned friends in this field says it's not lying. Don't find fault with the bond. It's actually doing what they call as imitative falsehood. One more acronym, one more jargon that we have to learn. So it lies like a human, right? So this is a scary part about it. So that's a summary of my first segment, right? It's a disruptive because it converses like humans, but it is still like a 7-year-old with a lot of knowledge out there, but at the end of it is still a 7-year-old. And why it is a 7-year-old? We saw how it gave a wrong data, how it tries to hide and all. We will see more examples on that. Let's go to second segment, a short segment. So here's a survey that we ran about where do you apply this one as of today. You can see that this is all like technical leaders from number of leading projects. 50% of them are telling they don't work on the set, but the rest of them, they have pointed out a couple of use cases. Number one is on the business applications, right? And we are going to see an example of that. Jenny is a bot. Many of us know the bots that we go and interact in a typical banking website. Probably by the time you go to the third or fourth interaction, you would have given up, right? It is completely machine like. You ask something, you want to block your card, it is actually talking about initiating a check request. That's a kind of maturity out there. But look at this one, right? Jenny is a mortgage domain bot built on the top of a generative AI large language model. And here the user, they put in a property of the photo. This is a house that I'm living today. I'm paying rent. Instead of paying rent, should I own it, right? Then the model behind doesn't ask any additional question. Just like a friendly person over the coffee, it gives you some interesting statistics. Hey, you know what? People with this type of income and quite a bit of them have similar properties. So it gives assurance to you. Then it says, when you can consider buying the property, then it says, can you get into details so I can help you out? Doesn't get you into any of the huge form filling, doesn't route you to a different thing. It didn't give irrelevant information. It gave very, very useful information. It's navigating you through the path. So this is a use case on the business side. There are plenty of use cases built in a small scale for education sector, for life sciences, pharmaceutical, travel industry, as well as the banking that we saw just now. So we are not going to spend time on this one. We are going to move on to the second use case, which is of our interest, the software development. Another survey, you can see that close to 10% are using some form of generative AI. My guess is most of them is about using what is publicly available, maybe a chat GPT or a bot or cloud. Some of it you go and type in a query or put your code in there, a test in there, you get it corrected or you generate the code itself. That's what they are doing. But interestingly, 10% are already on that path. And 26%, they say they don't do that today, but they are saying we're figuring out a way to go there. So very clearly, this is growing. Now, those are the two use cases predominantly at a larger level. If you go underneath business, there will be subdomains, domains, right? Where it is a text-based versus voice-based, audio-based, video-based. But without getting into the complexity, we have to understand only two use cases at a larger level. Definitely a lot of interest on the business side because of direct application. At the same time, we see increasing interest on the software development too. Every cloud provider out there, they have put in something called the Copilot or Copilot equivalent for the developers. Now we'll deep dive into the core part of the talk, generative AI for Agile software development, do's and don'ts. Specifically, I want to touch upon 6 do's and don'ts in that order. I definitely want to start with assuring that we don't need to be paranoid about generative AI. Right? One of the questions that I usually get is that it's going to replace some of the roles. What are the new roles that are emerging? We have good news there. So we are going to start with that. We are going to look at other things as well. Some of them are pretty straightforward to understand. Some of them may require a little bit of a technical understanding. I have simplified as much. Let's see if there are questions. We'll address any complexity that arises out of those technical scenarios. So we'll start with the first one. Do not get paranoid about generative AI. Why? Okay, here is something, right? At least major companies, enterprises, I have not personally seen a single enterprise grade application that's using generative AI in the production yet. There are point cases, there are plenty of proof points out there, but then is there a single application that is serving thousands of customers that has implemented security all the way to the last layer, that takes care of every other non-functional requirements that's a requirement for an enterprise grade software? Have not seen a single one yet. Number two, see, there is this one single advertisement put by a company called Anthropic, prompt engineer or a librarian, something similar, right? They said, anybody has a skill, we are going to hire you. The starting salary for you will be $240K US dollar. So that's a starting, right? It can go as high as 375, 380 K US dollar per annum. Is a huge salary, massive salary. Accomplished architects get half of it, right? Then it created shockwaves across, and everybody, including Forbes and all, they put an article that is an emerging role, and there is a huge demand. There is definitely some truth in this role being a significant role. This is going to be required for every company who's going to bring generative AI models in-house. Somebody has to prompt and fine-tune. But subsequent research for us revealed that the demand itself is not so great, right? LinkedIn earlier said they are looking at 3-digit demand. Later they retracted the statement early May. It's a double digit somewhere. They did a typo mistake. So there is only hype around those roles, and these are not new roles. Somebody with existing knowledge of AI and domain, they become prompt engineer. It's not a new role that's coming from the academics or industry, right? And humans are not going to be replaced. Very clearly, we see many on the generative AI proof points that are developed are more like assistants. Some human has to be there in the chain. We will see soon why that's the case. But if you look at all of this in perspective, right, it's going to take time. That's a message. So whatever role that you are in, especially in our industry, information technology industry, roles are not going to go away, including Agile Coach Scrum Master role. But you need to get comfortable around this concept. As I said, it will not be just a human that's doing a job. Just like it's very important for any manager to have MS Office package with them. You will not see anybody without that, right? Similarly, any technical role will have some sort of assistant to that. You should get comfortable handling it. You should get comfortable in doing some sort of a minor prompt engineering with those. So that's a key message with respect to first do's and don'ts. Don't get paranoid, right? It's not going to replace us, and it gives us ample time. My thinking is going to take another year before we see a lot of commoditization, wholesale embracing in a specific area within software. So you have time. So use that time to prepare for the future. Second do's and don'ts. Let's be gradual, right? Don't hurry. I will tell why I make this statement. Hurrying is okay, but do not hurry in the wrong area. Today, if you go to the YouTube, many of the generative AI experts teach others to use code generation assistant, test case generation assistants, but they come with a lot of risk that only enterprises will know about. So if you're running some sort of a gaming software company at a lower level, you can use it. If you are doing it as a hack for your own 2-3% team, it is okay. But a company that is regulated heavily, a company that is actually having very robust architecture to serve the customer in any domain, they cannot afford to bring in generative AI for coding just like that. We will see why that is the case. This segment is a little bit heavy. Let's see how we can take this through. So as I said, a lot of interest in building tools across the board in Agile software today. If you go to YouTube, you can get to see number of assistants for coding, testing, facilitation, user story generation, all across the life cycle. Right? These are some of the other examples. So everywhere, right from backlog grooming all the way till monitoring, plenty of, I would say, hacks, tools are put out there. But what's the problem? Problem is, these are not enterprise grade, and they will bring vulnerabilities. What specifically are the vulnerabilities? Let us see that. Let's first see how it looks like, right? When I say an assistant that is used for a specific activity within Agile software development, let's say coding. I have given example here. You see a window of a VS Code editor. We are going to start with our first Python program, very, very simple hello world type. Let's see what that is. So we want to compute the average of certain data, right? It is passed through some sort of array or list or a data set. You type in a comment there, function that computes the average. That's a comment in the ID. Then you go start typing the method name. What happens is the magic. Once you do that, Copilot, this little bit older version, but even the older version that gives alternatives. Say, you know what? From the comment, I understand you are going to compute the average of something that is given in a data set. And here is a ready-made code for you. How the code came from? This code came from the plenty of data the model has seen prior to the training. During the training, it has seen number of code segments, corresponding use cases. It has sort of a codified that. So when you type, I am going to compute an average, you don't need to reinvent the wheel once again. The model gives you not just one option, it gives multiple options. I have shown only two here. One is in terms of the proper integer, the other one is in terms of the float description, more or less the same. So suddenly the world looks simple, right? I don't need to write the code all of any language. Here I'm showing from a Python perspective, but you can write for any language. That's a good news. It definitely works. But the problem is it works as long as the code base is small. For small, straightforward, plain vanilla case, it works well. But when we try for large, complex code bases, I have plenty of thousands of lines of code. It actually struggles. It brings plenty of vulnerabilities. It gives incomplete score. So what we are very comfortable right now is when you do sort of a small modularized coding for a given method, 5 lines of code, 10 lines of code, this is great. But if it is a large complex code base already, you are going to insert a generated code. You have to be really, really careful because there's a whole lot of context of your existing code. This machine may struggle to fit within that. So right now the use cases are limited to only a small code base and refactoring it. And what happens on the testing side? I have taken one more example called isPrime. That's a method. It's a functional method. Very, very simple thing, right? Given a number, it's going to find out is it a prime number or not. Prime number being the number that can be divided by 1 or by itself. Otherwise, it cannot be divided. So very simple, popular formula, existing formula, math square root is used. And how do you apply generative AI for testing it? Very similar. You start with the method name, right? Unit test prime number. Rest of that is not typed by us. The comment starting from unit test for isPrime function all the way down is actually given ready-made by Copilot. And this is fantastic. Why? Many developers, they don't write unit test cases. The reason is it is mundane, it's boring, it's repetitive. You can see that, no? Assert isPrime 2 is true. This checking a lot of numbers randomly, and you have to write repetitive code. It's very boring. Many developers, they hate it. Machine does it. Beautiful, right? So it works well, but once again, when you take this one to an enterprise grade scenario, it has a problem. For well-known scenarios, simple data range, data type, it actually does well. But when you go for big testing, integration functional test, it requires a descriptive prompting. Otherwise, it's going to give a wrong test case. So some of the problems continue to be there. That's why earlier I made a statement. This is still evolving. It's great, innovative technology, very disruptive. But is it going to change our world in the Agile software development just like that? It's not going to change. So some of the risk, right? Security is definitely a risk. We'll see an example just after this. IP challenges. It might bring the code from larger universe out there. It was trained on existing OpenStack or stack space, GitHub repository and all that. So it could be somebody else's code. We will see a sort of a claim by one of the developers about an existing code that's given out by ChatGPT as his code, right? We are going to see that. So it's going to bring IP challenges, great risk for companies. Model output accuracy, right? It is not going to give exactly the correct output. As I told, for smaller code generation works well, but for larger code generation and enterprise thing, it may not actually give a very accurate output. privacy, we will also see an example of that. So let's take the first example, security. So here is the requirement that we had here. Write a simple listener. Simple listener. It listens to a port and parse an input, right? Forget about other complex wording in that. Just say that an input is given to a machine has to parse it. It gives a huge code, and I have taken only one line from the code. It is about scanning or parsing that input. The input given by the user is buffer, right? Buffer, can you see? That is what user has typed in the command line or in some user interface. Then the machine tries to parse that buffer, extract something called file name. What's the problem with this? The problem is the machine, the code before this, which defined buffer, it didn't define the buffer size, which is an acceptable coding practice by many developers, but during the code review, we find it, right? Many developers do like this. They don't define it, but we later during the code review, we capture it. But the machine actually does it because it learned from the human written code. What happens because of that? When the buffer length is undefined, it actually assumes a default length. Somebody who knows this program, they can write a huge, they can pass a huge string, abnormal string through the input. And because of that, it will run out of the size, it will crash the server. It's called a backdoor. Developers who know this vulnerability, they can actually crash your server. So this is a machine generated code. Problem is, it's not readily usable. It has broader security vulnerability. And here are some of the headlines that we keep seeing, right? This is actually a newspaper headline. Copilot just leaked someone's API key. API key is purchased with money. And the people did some jailbreaking. They have extracted the API key through generative AI. And here is another very popular thing that we are tracking, where lawsuit has been filed on GitHub for IP code being used, including a number of other things. And here is a claim by a developer that he checked if the code that he wrote for a customer is actually put out by Copilot. He says, yeah, and he has given a screenshot below. Sensitivity, I didn't include it. So you can see all the problems that are arising from using this for coding, right? So the summary of this one is, it is definitely a very useful assistant for many software development activities, but it brings a lot of risks as well. I think this is the biggest takeaway from today's session. Let's go on to the do's and don'ts 3. Musthafa, you talked about generative AI for Agile software development, but so far you have been only scaring us out, right? Nowhere you told, where are we going to apply, right? I'm in a hurry. I want to start somewhere. So let's see, what are some of the possible things that may not bring so much risk. Number one, resolution or facilitators, let's start with, right? So coding, testing, we saw issues. Facilitators, there is a beautiful feature out there. It's put out by a company called Spinach.io. They are giving this generative AI based avatar called AI Scrum Master. And you can include in a meeting like exactly what we are talking now. And what it does is it listens throughout. It uses audio-based generative AI capability. At the end of it, it combines audio and text and generates a beautiful summary like this. You can see that, right? It is a sprint planning. It captures sprint goal, captures user story. It also captures a task, which otherwise a human be doing it. See, it has some problems here. Sprint goal is not a very appreciable sprint goal, right? I'm not happy with it. Sprint goal typically is very, very transparent, see-through, visualizable work that we can do within few weeks. But here it is not looking like that, it's still abstract. So I'm not happy with the quality of it, but perhaps that is because how team that discussed it ended up a sprint goal like that. It may not be a problem of the scribe. So there are problems like that. But then just brought it. So it is a sounding board. We know humans can need to spend time on this one. So it does the job. But can we use it? We can use it, as I said, but let's use a risk score, right? So if we use a risk score for this one, it looks something like this, right? Security risk, almost none. IP challenges, model output, as I said, does some drawback, but perhaps that is because the input of the meeting participant was not great. Privacy risk is actually the one material risk here. Why privacy risk? Because this Spinach company is going to put this material in their AWS cloud. So that is accessible by the company. They provide plenty of guarantees about how it actually follows number of security principles defined. That should be genuine, I guess, but a company that's going to have to do some sort of a diligence check to check if this can be applied. But this is far less risky generative AI thing that we can use within Agile software lifecycle. Let's look at one more really quickly, lack of time. So here is one more defect resolution advisor, where you see an item, which is a defect description that's logged in Jira as an item, right? It's called issue there. Some error, right? While we are running some applications, some error. The minute that you have put in there, technically we have integrated Jira with GPT, right? That's a technical implementation. I don't want to talk about it. You can use a tool like Zapier to connect both. Once you do that, first comment that comes from that is actually from the GPT. It has read the error. It has put in immediate suggestion for you. Hey, you know what? For this one, you may want to go do this as a first step. If it fails, try the second step. That's pretty good, isn't it? Right? We don't log the defect and wait for anybody else to take up, or we don't want a senior developer to help us. There is something that is out there for us to try out, how I can go and resolve it. And it cuts down the time of my defect resolution. So this is another case in point. Once again, when you use a risk score, this is pretty decent one, not even a privacy risk. Some sort of implementation knowledge is required. You have to bring Jira and then connect the GPT. But as I said, there are shortcuts out there. There are tools like Zapier that does it very, very phenomenally well. So do's and don'ts 3, don't worry about, I cannot use coding, I cannot use it for testing. You can actually bring a lot of other low-hanging, less risky generative AI abilities, and you can reduce the risk of security IP, all the others. Fourth one, very important for companies that are providing services to others, right? Many of the companies in the Indian space actually are like the TCS, Infosys, Accenture, DXC, right? Many of us actually provide the services to customer. This is where we have to be really, really aware of the liabilities that we will get into whenever we agree for a work based upon generative AI. And we have to clarify some of the clauses in the contract statement of work between us and the customer. What are some of the bare minimum thing? Number one is, when a work involves generative AI, what are the tools, websites that the teams can access? And what should be blocked? A case in point, Apple, one of the very, very prominent innovative company, has blocked ChatGPT because they're really, really worried about their IP getting out into the world, because somebody may put that, right? Maybe a mistake, but they may put that. Similarly, they may download something that may get into IP infringement issue. So we have to clarify in that environment exactly which is allowed, which tools are allowed, which websites are allowed. And as for a generated artifact, suppose that work involves generating code, generating text from the large language model or generative AI, what's the definition of done for them? When the code will be approved for production move, right? How the IP check will be done? How the security vulnerability? Remember, I was showing that input statement scanf that the buffer can crash your server. Things how they will be verified. Is it going to be manual? If it's going to be fully manual, then what's the benefit of using generative AI itself? So these are things that has to be clarified. And finally, underlying language model itself, right? Which version we are going to use it? Plenty of open source versions are available today without paying money. You can use it. So you might be tempted to go use it, but always better to use a licensed version. There are options provided by each of this model provider to opt in, opt out. How they will be, which option we are going to go for. Almost everybody will go for opt out, but then we have to clarify that in the contract side so it can be verified later. So this is the fourth do's and don'ts. I have given only simple list there, but there are regulations that are being enacted. European AI Act that came in a couple of months back actually talks about classification of AI based upon risk, and you have to write a lot about it, right? What's the purpose, which data it was trained on, what will be the nutrient information, so on and so forth. This is going to only grow. Regulations will grow, and we have to keep a tab on that and capture and comply by the regulation in any contractual work that we do. Couple of more do's and don'ts, and I'm done. This is a very interesting one, right? So far, I talked generative AI from an efficiency uplift perspective. We can use code generation for a small segment, subject to the fact that we can review it completely. We can do that. Instead of that, go for a less risky, low-hanging features such as AI Scrum Masters. We can do that. But these are still only efficiency gain. But they are not disrupting the agile delivery cycle itself, right? We can do that. How we can do that? So this is the path that you know, right? Typical sprinting cycle where it takes few weeks to really create a demonstratable software. But what if there is an alternative using generative AI? You get the prioritized future, right? And you don't necessarily go do a full-blown development. Instead, you can use some generative mechanism to create the outcome, a working code in a short amount of time, in hours. That's quite possible. We experimented with that. It works very well. And you can make decisions based on that. Instead of waiting for the teams to create something for 2-3 weeks, 4 weeks, and spending your time, then making a decision on it within hours. We call that as a living agile in TCS, right? Within 1 day, within 4 hours, how you can do something, and then business can make some decisions. So thereby saving money and time. And here is an example from a company called Teleport HQ. So where you can write, here is a website development example. You can write the markup in a plain piece of paper. Here it is printed, but you can actually handwrite. The tool still recognize it. Then import that into the tool. Then it creates level 2 website without much of a complicated tags, without much of a business-driven architecture. It does create a very acceptable front end with some sort of hook behind, and you can adjust it right from the color, font, what event, pictures. You can actually play around. It doesn't require you to have any technical knowledge, and you can have it published as a working code in a live environment. All of this is possible within few hours. And once you have done, business can look at it and they can say, you know what, this is great, but this is not what I wanted. Same agile concept, right? Get the feedback early as possible. Greatest agile teams, they get the feedback as early as possible. And this one enables it. So net, you are not spending few weeks to create everything in production like environment, test environment, show the customer. In fact, you create quickly working, it's not a prototype, it's a working code actually, and shows, and you can play around with that. So it's a great use case. It increases value. So do not forget that instead of looking at generative AI only from a productivity perspective, doing it right perspective, it can help you find right things to do. And this is where I see plenty of promises out there. During backlogging itself, during sprint planning itself, we can generate an outcome right there and then work with the business to ensure that this is not what we want to do, but this is what we want to do, right? That's kind of discussion that we are excited about. Last do's and don'ts. Many of them are still hacks. As I told, it's going to take a while for us to see global level, enterprise level features out there. We can invest for the future. I call it as build the runway. What does it mean? Create a lot of high quality data, right? As I told, the machine actually generates from what's available out there. It doesn't create anything new. It look at multiple patterns. It will create a pattern from that. And if it has to create quality code for you without vulnerabilities, if it has to create quality test without IP issues, then the input data also should be high quality. It should be contextual. So every organization will have to use its own data to train these models. So very essential for to build high quality data now. It not only scored and test, it's also about project performance. See, today we have a habit of updating the machine once the work is over. I know many cases where people, they go and update Jira after a while. They don't update it real time, and hence the data that is coming in there is not high quality. But if you don't have high quality data, you cannot use the data to train your model, because a model output will be wrong. So if your organization has to have a competitive edge for using generative AI in agile software development, first thing that you want to start is look at the quality of the data that you have today. Your journey has to start from there. Couple of other suggestions: enhance your skills. I told, right, you need to know about generative AI concepts and tools, and you should be comfortable in using them as assistant. Please do that. System upgrade. Some of the thing may be high computing environment. When you train your model, when you are going to use some of the assistant that will consume huge amount of processing power, you may have to upgrade defined systems in your environment from normal CPUs to GPU, in some cases to TPU. So these are some of the early work that we can do. As I told earlier, please start writing quality artifact for your project, because this will be used to tune the model for your own company context tomorrow. And remember, generative AI doesn't create new content from the blue. It creates a content based upon the existing content or data. Yeah. So that's a summary of that. So when you do that, you will be protected from the vulnerabilities that I talked about. In fact, this is the way that world is moving to. There are serious conversation about should I go for a code GPT for my own environment? Should I go for test GPT so that they will consume less data to train, and the data that will be trained will be my own data than publicly available data, so the risks are really low and the training time is going to take less. So we are going to look at plenty of specialized GPTs than one single model that's going to drive all of it. So that's the way the world is moving to. So throughout this presentation, it kept referring to generative AI model, right? That's a huge topic by itself. As I told, it is very similar to how brain works. And if you're interested, we can have another conversation on how that model looks like for those of you interested in looking at that work. But right now, as a developer, as a tester, as a manager, as an architect, as a director of Agile software development portfolio, these are all the things that you have to know as of this date. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, we are looking at 6 clear do's and don'ts. Don't get paranoid. Be gradual. Think twice before you go for high risk cases. Does it mean that we don't have anything to start with? You have some great, exciting, low risky features that we can start with. Be aware of the risk so that when you are entering into a contract based work, you can really clarify that out. And look at generative AI not only from a productivity efficiency perspective, but also from a value perspective. And enough work is there on our plate to create a number of things as a base for tomorrow's adoption of generative AI. So with that, I will just come to the conclusion. Thank you so much.
Very, very good, Musthafa. Excellent session. Yeah, so Srini, please handle the Q&A moderated.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So thank you,
Sir,
sir. Thanks for the session. Yeah, we have a question from Mr. Susi.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Hi. Mr. Musthafa, excellent presentation. In fact, I should congratulate Dr. Rajaram, because in the previous spin meeting, I had asked some questions on AI, and they were to be answered, and you answered all the questions almost. And what I find it interesting is that in the last slide, you said runway for the future, because all the do's and don'ts that you have kind of taken us through is something that, where the decision is left to the human brain, or the human decision making is purely human and not necessarily machine. So I was wondering, do we or can we foresee a future where you will have tools for managing a lot of issues that you highlighted in AI, so that it becomes a kind of foolproof and easier to kind of implement? I just wanted to, get your views on that.
So I want to answer that from a technologist mind perspective, right? I wear the technologist hat. We are going to go there. There is no doubt about that, right? Generative AI is sort of a mid-level. When it becomes a general artificial intelligence, right, where it's going to equal to a human, and there are a lot of estimates about that coming up from anywhere after 2030. Some of them are telling 2050. That time it's going to be possible. But grounded in sort of a today's thing, we lack one very critical thing for a scientific base called reproducibility. Today morning, I go and give a query or a prompt to ChatGPT, it gives me an answer. Today evening, I go and do the same, I get a different answer. It doesn't give the reproducibility. Reproducibility is very, very important for testing, auditing, traceability, certification, guarantee, certainty, maintenance. These are the requirements for to run the business, right? We are not there. So I would say that it will be incremental. We will definitely go to a place where it can actually do like a human. That's a long horizon out there. Interim is we have this urgent problem to solve, this reproducibility. Once we go there, then probably next step would be something like what is said.
So do you think that it will take up to 2030 for that?
Best of the minds couldn't answer that. So
Okay.
I can take a guess, but my guess is as good as anybody else's guess.
No, I think you are at the top of it, so you must be saying the right thing. But I just feel that there could be some developments which can happen in between and hasten the process, because not only enterprise grade, it is also that when you are approaching a client with solutions, and if you have so many do's and don'ts to the client, initially the client may accept in all his enthusiasm, but over a period of time, he might look for a tool. That makes me feel that it could be a little faster than what you feel.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
So next we have a question from Mr. Nathan. Sir, you can unmute and ask the question yourself.
Listen to my voice.
Yes.
Yeah, you're audible. Yeah.
Yeah, sir. Actually, I have one thought. Because spin. Actually, these kind of today, everybody talks about AI, everything. And I think having Dr. Rajaram organizing in a spin is actually a right time, because so many people talk about AI. Really, it is AI or some kind of a scripting. Okay. So my one kind of a thought process is, because ChatGPT 3 I have used, 4.0 is charged one. See, the challenge today is, can we build a kind of a security layer? Okay, the minute I type from my front end, okay, whatever access I am doing, this filter can be a genuine filter which will the kind of quality, all that aspect, and then send the data back to the GPT 4.0.
Absolutely.
Because this will actually help people talking so much negative about ChatGPT, etc., which is not, according to me, true, because it is going to improve the way you actually code. It also learns from you. It is not that replacing anybody. Anyway, like we people are, I have been in the field for a long time, and computer came in, everybody said job is going off. Today it is in the same bank where I started. Now without computer, bank cannot even run. So I just thought, what is your thought on it? How do we, create the, wrong message that is going, AI is taking out job. So this, I think the discipline can be done. It will be good. Sorry, I just wanted to convey this thought.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. So wherever somebody is taking huge interest in this, and they want to go faster to the market, they go for a high-end thing called private instance generation, right? For example, Bloomberg. They built their own model from scratch. Not everybody can do that. So what others are doing is similar to what you just said. They have this architecture pattern called agent in between. So there is an agent, right, that is sitting in between the user and the LLM, and the agent orchestrates. It actually gets an input. It verifies it for toxicity, bias, etc., jailbreaking commands, and then formulates a query, prompts, and then pass it on to the LLM. Same thing happens, it comes back. Cognitive search is another example from Azure. Google is trying something called a responsible AI layer. So Nathan, that's definitely one of the architectural patterns that we are seeing well regarded on that one.
Sir, is it giving opportunity? Because this is a point came from my son only, who's sitting next to me listening to you. So he was only suggesting this thought, how good an Indian company like, a small startup can develop this, so that, it can be layered, and, because every front end has to use this, as you rightly said it, before going to the cloud, that front end can actually filter this, so that people don't abuse this. You understand? Because AI is also getting abused, right? Okay. So is this possible as a, kind of an product to be developed, and then it will in turn connect to the, whatever the LLM machine in the beginning, so that it doesn't, give a wrong messaging.
Yeah. Quite possible, but I want to sort of caution, balance with the caution though. That is a way to go. There is no doubt about it. Today, if you look at the market, a lot of people are running like headless chickens, churning out some sort of architectural pattern like that. But they are not answering the core questions, right? The one example that I raised was reproducibility, right? What is a reproducibility ratio? So if you look at the evaluation of the model, there are 16 models to evaluate a LLM. And when they pass those models, evaluation models with perfect score, they will be enterprise grade. So when a startup or when a company in India tries to bring in the layer, they have to start from those foundational things, than putting in a hack that will work for a given scenario, but it's not as solid as passing this evaluation models out there. So a little bit of a core research has to go in there. It has to be built from that. It has to be incremental thing on what Google has done or what OpenAI has done, so that it can be a world-class point of view and capability than just one more hack from one more company.
Thanks a lot for answering me. I think it has given some thought. He was sitting next to me. I think let us see. But it has to happen over a period of time, because Elon Musk also said AI is actually to help the civilization. Okay, and people should not abuse it like your atom bomb, right? So I think, but it is definitely a disruptive thought process AI is going to do in the country going forward. Thanks a lot, sir, for your time. And
Thank
thanks
you.
Rajaram and team, both Rajaram's and team, for organizing here. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you. So next we have a question from Mr. Venkat. Venkat, you want to unmute and ask the question yourself? Venkat? Okay, so
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, what I asked is, firstly, great presentation.
Thank
Right. My question is, for sprint planning, what kind of data, would typically be the feed or input, for the generative engine, and of course, if it'll be nice if we can share the deck as well. So that's my question.
Sure. A lot of things can be taken as input, but what I am very excited about its relevance to sprint planning is the fact that we can estimate with much more accuracy. That is where things will go wrong, right? Business talks about this, then we talk about that, but when we get into development, then we see that a lot of assumptions become untrue. Using generative AI, we can refine the estimate for a given feature by actually doing it in hours. So the biggest input for sprint planning in wherever you are using generative AI is you get the estimate validated through generative AI and come with those backlog items. And as I said, through the within the sprint planning, you can use AI, Scrum Master, etc. for more of operational outcome. But the greatest benefit will come when you use generative AI for validating your user stories or epics or whatever it is, and arriving at a estimation. The minute that you put a hour or a dollar amount, suddenly people become sensible about what they're asking for.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So next we have a question, more like a comment from Arpita. Arpita, you want to unmute and go yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Rajaram. It was a really good deck and presentation. I am working on the many Gen AI tools and Copilot when it was installed on my system, and then started giving the input whatever I am searching or whatever I am using as a programming. So I found it the output itself is not relatable how it should be, and it is giving the output, yeah, but what I am seeking of, it is somehow I need to go to the Stack Overflow or Google at the end of the thing, because Gen AI, whatever the tools, whatever the language models I'm using, Hugging Face or Kaggle, whatever I'm using, I if I'm looking for some code or some sample, yeah, Copilot is not the appropriate tool that I'll say. Some like the sentiment analysis for the particular mail or for any product review also, it is not as good as it should be. The accuracy is still very low as it should be. That's what my review is. Thank you.
Thanks, Arpita.
Yeah, I have one question, Mr. So from a client angle, are they raising any questions around the generative AI? Are they asking? Have they started asking? Is this code developed by you, or did you use generative AI? And do we have to give some what do you call riders and things like that? Is it a concern, or is it they are encouraging it, or where are they on this?
See, first thing, so I'm not talking from a TCS perspective. I'm talking from a collective visualization of what's happening out there. First thing that many organizations have done is block any avenue for getting the code from anybody. Right? So they are really paranoid about some code coming in as well as our code going out. Copilot is available only for elite of a given company, right? A research group, somebody who is a COE, not for every developer out there. I have not seen a single company, maybe they're a startup company where software is not a main business, they might be doing it, but anybody who is running a very sensible enterprise, they are given only to elite for researching us, researching them, and then giving us a concrete roadmap about how others can scale it up. That is what it is today. What you raise is a very important point, right? The code generated by a machine versus somebody has written. This is a problem today. When OpenAI is trying to put a nutrient information, right? This is put a label on, this is a AI generated content. They are failing. They one very useful, this one is generative adversarial network, where it looks at the human generator versus machine generator for the image content. That they are able to find out somehow. But as far the text-based, code-based, they are failing miserably. Latest one last week, they said that they have difficulty there. That has to be solved. So customers would like to know that this is a machine generated code versus a human generated code, because there's a liability that comes out of the code. Somewhere it has to be found out, right? Whether it was an intentional thing or more of an accident by a machine. That's a very, very valid question. Unfortunately, we had difficulty in putting that label out there. This is machine versus human.
And the follow-on thing is, this can affect our potential estimations for a software development. And a client may push us down whenever we estimate and say that, hey, possibly you guys are, with the code generation tools like generative AI, your estimation should be much lesser. I think that danger is also there very much.
Absolutely. Plenty of people are actually talking like that openly, but they have to remember, right? It is not a straight line like that. When the Agile itself, an example, right? When Agile started, everybody thought this was about productivity improvement, just like that. But what we really looked at the ground over a period of time was initial effort actually will go up, because you're going to set a lot of foundational thing. Your architecture may not be available. You still sort of experimenting a lot. More test cases than test cases, the waterfall wall. So the effort actually will go up a little bit. Then you learn, then you get the art, then you actually subside down. Then there is one sweet spot where you are going to really see the benefit. I'm seeing exactly the same thing for generative AI as well. The view that it's going to increase the productivity by this factor and want to reduce this from you guys, you have to start building less, or we have to remove people. Those are very, very uninformed way of looking at generative AI today. It will undergo its own learning cycle. In fact, it will take a lot of time. As I said, machine generates a code. Reviewing has to happen. Somebody has to go through all of it, fix it. Sometimes the whole effort might become waste. They will get better. But the initial period of teaching the machine to get better, it's going to take a time. I think that time we have to be very, very favorable, empathetic to that view, then start asking for brownie points right from day one.
Mr. Musthafa, I have one add-on question. Is it possible to have some digital filters, which basically questions like, most recent, or till yesterday, some options like that, and then ratings, those who are rated it as genuine and those who are rated it as not so genuine. And so like that, if you can have some questions and, which are supported by some answers, is it not possible to kind of, choose the best?
Very much possible. This is what the technical jargon for what you just described is a RLHF, right? Reinforcement learning with human feedback, right? This is actually how the last phase of the LLM will be tuned in a Q&A, and then approving the right behavior, approving the right, star rating equivalent. But it is going to happen in a training environment. Today, whatever we are accessing in the public environment, right? Whether it is a OpenAI API license version or a ChatGPT public interface, in both cases, we will not be able to tune the machine. We will not be able to, right? So they had to invest, put that in your own environment. That's why I'm telling us as building the runway for your future. You get that and make that as your private instance and start tuning that model, give you your own data, give thumbs up for right thing, give thumbs down for all the bad things. So that you will have your own quality source than relying on the public thing out there. It's possible, but it's going to require computing power, investment, and then patience for getting it right.
Oh, I see. Okay, right. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
So we have one more question from Madhu. Madhu, you want to unmute and ask it yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the presentation was good. One of them is the large companies using their own LLMs. That's what large enterprises using, so that they can inherently build the code or use the code that they generated. But how about the small companies? I don't even think they can afford their own LLMs, because the hardware itself is very costly. And going for some open AI and all those technologies, it'll lose the proprietary code that they want to build. How do you see that happening?
See, if you take a GPT-3, right, a GPT 3.5, the number of parameters are 1.76 billion parameters. It's going to be huge, massive. You are going to require a ton of super processors to run the computing environment. Private companies may not be able to afford, but the good news is there is this concept called smaller models, 200 million parameters, not 1.76, 200 million, 100 million, that are trained with only contextual data, and that does the job called a task specific job. This is going to be only used for testing. This is going to be only used for coding. So you have some of the base from let's say GPT-2 to 200 million parameters, right? It's a smaller model, and couple that with your own data, you can actually accomplish that with a very limited infrastructure on GPUs. You don't need TPUs. So it's very much possible for a company to go for a smaller model and make it task specific. It will not be a universal solution. You cannot go and type about everything like what we are doing today. It will answer queries. It will give you very accurate output for a given task. Diagnosis, right? Diagnosis on certain diseases. It will only serve that. Code generation for Java. It might only serve that. So those models can be small. Their private instances can be built. And they found out that the accuracy of that task specific LLM in many cases is much better than a generalized larger model. So very valid question. Private companies, smaller companies, they can go for a small sized one, contextualized, trained for a very specific task.
So next we have Murugan has raised his hand. Murugan, you can unmute and ask yourself.
Can you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Musthafa, for excellent talk. See, the continuation of your thought, is it industry specific engine will be possible coming out of ChatGPT for healthcare, for the telecom? As you said, the base will be common with them, and then industry specific enterprise can buy it, license it, and can use it.
That is the way they are thinking today, Murugan sir. What I hear is base going forward. See, by giving a general model to everybody, that business model also will not work for a company, right? For example, if you take OpenAI, they would be thinking similar to what you just said, right? There'll be insurance GPT, there'll be a wealth management GPT, and they can be further fine-tuned by the company. They can maintain their private instance. So very clearly, we are seeing the world going there. And maintaining a single general model at a larger level, retraining is a very, very costly affair. It's not practical. And for you to keep pushing that upgrade version to individual companies is going to be a problem. So it will emerge as an industry specific. In cases, it can even go to subdomain level.
Thank you. In continuation of that, similarly, we had a similar concept when the RDBMS came. Okay, how do we differentiate between a normal DBMS and RDBMS? That's why the card rule came and everything. Do you see in future anything like AI maturity model? Okay, this is the real AI product based on these conditions and everything.
See, the European AI Act, they have defined some rules like that, right? One is a risk-based scoring, and they do specify subsequent what they call as a ladder-based thing, right? Second ladder, this belongs to general purpose. This belongs to task specific. This belongs to one rating where we don't even need to certify that. It is less harmful. So there is a pretty good clarity of clarification from the European AI Act. Now we have to see what other countries are going to do. When there is some sort of a similarity between them, I'm definitely seeing something like what you just said emerging.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rajaram, both Rajaram, for organizing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. I think you have been very generous. Yeah, over to you, Srini, for the vote of thanks.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So first of all, thanks to Mr. Musthafa. Thank you, sir. Thanks for taking the time. And thanks for being with us today for this wonderful session, starting from how exactly GPT works compared to how human-like. Just like you said, I think most of us wouldn't even have had the urge to converse with a chatbot after the second or the third prompt. And going back to, and just when the last WWDC of Apple, this why they haven't announced anything about GPT and AI was a major question. And thanks to your inputs on how exactly that is being taken up by Apple and how they have banned everything. So thanks to a whole lot of things and the entire session on how exactly Gen AI is going to shape the agile software development. And thanks for your time, and thanks to all the participants out there who took the time off on a weekday, join with us for this session. And it has been totally engaging, and the participant count didn't drop off till the last point, everyone who started off stayed on till the last minute. So that actually proved how engaging the session has been. Thanks to you, sir, and to all the participants. The session will be posted in YouTube. Post this at a later point in time, and that again, you can check it out at Chennai's YouTube link. And to a note to all the participants, we are going to come up with our Watson Free Awards 2023 very soon. Keep, have a look out at your mail for all that. And thanks to Mr. Musthafa, thanks to Dr. Rajaram for putting this up, and thanks to our entire, Spin Chennai Speaking Committee and everyone. Thanks a lot. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very insightful.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.